Hello and welcome back. My name is Jared. I'm a registered dietitian. Um, and today we are going to be talking about stress, sleep, um, and how that affects weight loss, basically. Um, so uh, we'll kind of just jump right into it. Um, so, stress and sleep are an incredible part of of the whole weight loss picture. Um, when you are chronically stressed or you don't get enough sleep, which are two can be two different things, but they can also be related. That can really affect um, your ability to lose weight. So they're both very important parts of the process of weight loss. So, um, and disclaimer, I'm not a therapist, um, but with weight loss, stress is an important part, like I said. So it's really important to think about your stress levels um, and how you can cope or deal with some of that high stress. So, in today's world, almost everybody has some sort of life stressors. It's just part of it. Everybody does. Whether you are an incredibly busy person, if you have kids, taking them to daycare, school closures, um, work, um, meeting deadlines. Um, Sometimes maybe the workplace isn't a very healthy place to be, and that can cause stress. Relationships, um, you know, just um, just kind of day to day things where everybody, all of us, deal with certain life stressors. Now, if you are chronically stressed, um, that can really make a big impact if you're trying to lose weight. So I think um, some thoughts I think for this is maybe you have changed a lot of things in your life. So you've decreased the calories that you're consuming in a day. Um, you change the composition of the food. So maybe you're eating more fruits and vegetables, less saturated fats, simple sugars, and you're exercising more. And you've hit a plateau, or you still can't seem to lose enough weight. Um, there might be another part of it that you haven't been thinking of, and that might be the stress factor of it. So I think everybody should take a moment and just think about the stressors in their life. Are there a lot of stressors going on? Um, are you noticing that you just can't seem to make that weight come off? There's more than likely some sort of stressor that's causing um, you to hang on to that weight, or even make you gain weight. Um, so physiologically, when you have chronic stress, so over a long period of time, um, that can increase your cortisol levels in your body. Um, Prolonged high cortisol levels can, it's kind of gets complicated, but there's a bunch of different things that it does in your system. It can make you increase your glucose in your bloodstream. So, and it counteracts the insulin, which is the opposite of decreasing your blood sugar. Uh, so, prolonged high glucose in your system, which can cause weight gain and insufficiency in your pancreas. So, that's really important. Um, so, that's why you want to try to, and it's easier said than done, control your stress levels. So, um, again, chronic stress can cause higher amounts of cortisol in your system, and so that's why we don't want to. Um, that's why we do not want to have a stress, over a long period of time. Now, there's always going to be stress. It's just a matter of how you deal with it and, um, identifying it. So, Um, so that's one component of it. Now, the other side of that too is with with weight loss, is the sleep part of it. So sometimes when you have higher amount of stress, that can lead to sleepless nights as well. Maybe you're sitting up thinking about work, or maybe you're thinking about your kids' daycare, or school, or whatever it is that you're thinking of, that can lead you to not have such good sleep. Um, so having really good sleep can really help out with the weight loss as well. So they're kind of, they're two different things. Some cases where um, high stress and then you have not enough sleep. Um, Now, I think sometimes there is situations where you might have higher stress, but you sleep all right, or vice versa, where maybe your life isn't as stressful, but you don't sleep as well. Me being a father of two kids, less younger than three, I can tell you, you know, um, just working with kids that age, that you just don't get as much sleep. So that can definitely affect your your weight loss, and I can tell in my own self with that, um, which can slow down your metabolism. Um, so um, that's some of the things. That's how those two things can affect your weight loss journey, or your path, um, or your progress. So um, now now we've talked about um, uh, what stress does to us, what it does in your body, and then we talked about when you don't sleep enough, what it does, and how that affects your weight loss. Now, what are some of the things that we can do um, to help with those things? Um, so, first off, is and I forgot to mention this as well. So, going back to the stressful part of our lives, if you have chronic stress, that also decreases your metabolism as well, and it's all part of it. But anyways, we'll kind of get to some ways to help with your stress. So, I think for stress levels, uh, being chronically stressed, I think one of the most important things is getting regular exercise. Um, so we talked a lot about the benefits of exercise, um, to our muscle mass, to our cardiovascular system, to the aiding of weight loss by burning calories. But also, it has a humongous impact on our stress levels. So, and also our sleep patterns. So, when you get regular exercise, it helps decrease the amount of stress that you have. And there's plenty of data and research to back that up. And I think most people understand that. Also, it helps regulate your sleep pattern, so you sleep significantly better when you do exercise. Um, so, and I think in a subjective way, I can tell when I wake up in the morning, I go for a run, how much better I feel and how much more productive I am in the day versus when I just wake up and just go to work. So I think we all have those situations where we've noticed that in our own selves. So exercising is an incredible, important part of decreasing stress and improving your sleep patterns. So um, another part of that too would be nature. So getting out for hikes, whatever it is that you like to do, mountain bikes, um, rafting, skiing, whatever that might be. It's really important to, um, well, if you have access to, but it's really important to get into some sort of nature setting, which here in Santa Fe and New Mexico, that's not all that difficult to do. There's pretty good access to a lot of good places where you can, uh, get into nature. And it might even be driving somewhere to watch the sunset. That is really pretty. Maybe it's to go have a picnic up in Hyde Park. It doesn't have to be just always, exercise, but it's important to um, give yourself that opportunity to get into some sort of nature. Um, so, that's an important part of it. Again, like I said this before, I'm not a therapist, but maybe if you do have a high amount of stress, maybe it is good to seek out a therapist to help you cope with some of those stressful moments in your life. Um, so I really highly encourage everybody to do that. And they can all be part of your team, your team. You have a dietitian, me, um, and then you can, also get a therapist. Um, Maybe you are a therapist and you know some coping mechanisms um, from ways to decrease your amount of stress that you have. Um, so, that's important. And then I think this is like a really big step, but taking a look at your life, and maybe there is a job that is your current job is way too stressful. Um, Looking at all the components in your life and saying, man, maybe I need a change in scenery. Maybe getting a new job if the current job's kind of toxic. Um, it's going to make a humongous difference if you are chronically stressed and you figure out the reasoning for that stress. Um, Maybe just switching that up, making a big change. Easier said than done, right? But or maybe it's in a relationship. Maybe it's a friend. Um, maybe it's your significant other. I don't know. You kind of have to look into yourself, and it's a tough process. Um, but identifying what's going on, um, and maybe trying to make some changes to improve the stress in your life. So, and again, that's easier said than done, and maybe I don't have all the tools to help you with that, but finding someone that can help you identify those things. So, that's, I think, when you look at your life and you could see, identifying, I think that's the first step is just identifying um, those stressful moments in your life, um, or the triggers that happens. That's a really big part of it. Now, there's also, so we haven't really talked about this either, but stress can also lead to, in the self-described way, stress eating. So what that looks like is when some people have difficulties with this is when there's a high amount of stress in their lives, they tend to cope by eating, and it's typically things that that aren't as good for you. Sweets come to mind, chocolate, cakes, donuts, those kind of things that are high caloric, that don't have a whole lot of nutrient value for us. Some people overeat, so they just, once they start, they just can't stop, and they just overeat. And that can also lead to weight gain, of course. And it's almost like a binge eating type thing where they just can't stop. The pattern for that usually looks like they do really well in the morning, they do really well at lunch typically, and then you almost always see is when they come home, they eat just everything in front of them. And usually what that looks like is what happens is when they eat all that high amount of food that night, the next day they think in their mind that they're going to compensate for that. So they don't eat as much the next day, or they skip a meal. That's really common too. Thinking that by skipping that meal that they're not going to have as many calories into themselves for the day. But then what happens is that they get even more hungry, and then the same pattern persists day in and day out. And then anytime that there's any sort of stress inserted in there, it just goes even more. So I think the first thing to do with that is to identify what triggers you. If you fall into that category that you are an emotional or stress eater, um, identify that stress or the trigger that causes that stress, that can lead you to um, overeat. Um, so, for example, I think, let's say that you've had a really stressful day, you come home, um, and maybe, I think this has happened to all of us, but maybe you had a plan to eat stir fry, lots of vegetables, maybe tofu. So really pretty healthy meal. You have all the ingredients at home, but instead on the way home you see McDonald's and you say, okay, I'm gonna pull through there. Um, I just don't feel like cooking, so I'm gonna grab that. So it's kind of the opposite. Um, so maybe, for yourself, like think about that. You have a stressful day and you're gonna drive by a McDonald's. Maybe take a different route. Um, Maybe if you have time, maybe you need to go for a walk before you drive home, just to decompress, try to eliminate or try to decrease some of that stress before you go home, so you can make a good choice. Um, Another instance where I think a lot of people fall into as well is they go home, so they've had a stressful day. They go home and they make the supper, um, they eat, and then they continue to eat all night, throughout the evening. And then it's also, oh, I'm going to eat a dessert too. I'm going to get, chocolate cake or whatever, pie. And then they eat the, one piece of pie, two pieces of pie, and so that keeps on progressing. So in that instance, I think, again, what triggers you? And I know this always isn't possible, but what can you do to just take a break from that situation? So maybe you need to go for a walk prior to um, making supper. Maybe when you have supper, you just clean everything up, or not even clean anything up, and just go for that walk, or whatever it is that de-stresses you. Maybe it's doing yoga. Maybe you need to meditate. Maybe it's playing music. It doesn't have to, or reading a book, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be exercise, but movement tends to help out a lot in those situations. So in that instance, again, have supper, take a little break, and if you come back and you still feel truly hungry, like really check in with yourself. Okay, am I hungry? And identify that. Then, maybe you can have a little piece of that pie, but then, do a small piece, put it on the small plate, sit down, eat, have that, and then talk to yourself. Look inside yourself and say, do I really need another piece of that? Sometimes just checking in with yourself makes a humongous difference. Most of the time you won't, when you're being thoughtful in your eating process, you won't overeat. When you're thinking about it and you're taking your time and you are being mindful with that. So those are a couple techniques that you can do to help you in those kind of situations. So again, it's to kind of recap everything. It's not an easy process. I think everybody nowadays has some sort of stressors in their life, but it's just how we cope with those things and how we do to overcome some of those obstacles. So I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know if you have any questions on this topic, and I look forward to discussing it. So thank you very much.